We'll be taking a closer look at what is being behind the big bounce in commodities. To help us make sense of this is Ettienne van Wyk, commodities specialist at RMB, and of course Strickers is still with me at the desk. Ettienne, thanks for your time. Over the past couple of sessions, it looks as though there was quite a bounce back in the commodities. What can we attribute this to, and was this just the dead cat bounce?
Yeah, bounce back from a very low level. So I don't know how much we can read into it. Look, if you look at commodity charts, irrespective of which one, maybe with the exception of gold and silver, but certainly for the rest of the complex, if you look at the price charts over the last 2 years, it really looks as if we fell off an abyss, you know. And I don't know what one should make of this. The only thing that springs to mind is what's that old saying? Do not strike a camp above the abyss if you're not a bird. You know, so I don't know if we had any birds in the commodity producer sector, but anyway, so it certainly does look very glum. Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe just a bit of context to that. Over the last 2 years, we've seen a 40% drop in the greater complex, with some constituents, you know, going down as much as 60%. I'm thinking of iron ore, for example. Oil price certainly not looking a lot better. But as I remarked earlier, the gold price hasn't really been that affected. We've seen a lot of volatility, but in terms of general trend, it's been relatively stable. The same also for silver. Of course, the other precious metals, PGM specifically, haven't had the same amount of luck. Platinum prices coming off sharply.
Speaking of platinum, I know that Strickers wants to jump in regarding that.
Yeah, well, speaking of PGMs, which is obviously very important from a current account perspective for SA and very important as to regards from a jobs perspective in SA, what does the Volkswagen debacle hold in for the future of platinum? I know there's a lot of talk of what the trajectory or what the trends will be in the motor industry, and what effect will that have longer term on the platinum price and the industry?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think short term, we've already seen some volatility, or some of that news factor into the price. We've seen a sharp increase in palladium prices over the last 2 weeks, and we've seen a drop off in platinum prices, although there seems to have been a bit of a recovery. Of course, the rationale or the general explanation for that behavior given was that platinum is mostly used in diesel auto catalysts for nitrous oxide reduction, whereas palladium is more used in petrol cars. So potentially, you know, with a pullback in the amount of diesel cars or diesel engines being supplied into the North American and European markets, that of course would dampen demand for platinum. So that's been the general context given to that.
But surely it doesn't make sense to put more platinum into the catalyst then?
Yeah, look, I mean, more isn't better necessarily, you know. Irrespective of what South Africans might think. Sorry, a bit of a digression. It's interesting, you know, this whole movement towards reducing the size of things and, you know, washing powder instead of having to use 500 grams for each wash. Now you only have to use a teaspoon or whatever. So this whole drive globally to make everything smaller was actually quite a big flop in South Africa, because South Africans generally, when you buy a big box, you believe it's more and it's better value for money than buying the same, you know, paying the same amount of money for a smaller box. Anyway, so more isn't necessarily better. I think platinum is a good case.
So it's actually a supply side problem. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think it's a confidence problem and a supply.
Just on that, I just want to get some clarity. You know, you did say the VW, the news around it has been factored in the movement in the platinum price. So what really moves the price of these commodities right now? Is it big news out of companies, out of things that are happening, or is it economic data that's coming through and the dollar rand? I mean, which one has the biggest punch?
Combination of all of them. Certainly the strong dollar, you know, has had its effect on commodity prices. Secondly, a supply glut. You know, production growth, and that talks to the sector generally. I don't know if it necessarily applies to platinum, but a ramp up in production capacity over the last 10 years, and then the need to cover a very high fixed cost base. You know, reducing the typical producer reaction to low prices, which is just to pull back production. So the supply side definitely had its effect. Then demand, and more importantly, uncertainty about the world's biggest commodity producer, being China, their appetite for commodities going forward.
Yeah.
So those things have been very important. In platinum, there has been, or in the PGM sector generally, there has also been very big above ground supplies on the one hand, and also much more efficient recycling technology, which means that a lot of the platinum that went into auto catalysts over the last 10-15 years, most of it's actually perfectly recyclable.
Okay.
So you know, that adding another supply factor.
Ettienne, thanks so much. Always taking in a lot of information in a short amount of time, and always bringing in those lovely sayings that you bring with you. Thanks, Ettienne. Ettienne van Wyk, Commodities Specialist at RMB.